HowExpert! Top 10 knitting tips. HowExpert publishes quick how-to guides on all topics from A to Z by everyday experts. Visit HowExpert.com to learn more. Make sure to subscribe to our YouTube channel for more HowExpert Top 10 videos in the future. Moving on, let's talk about the HowExpert Top 10 knitting tips. Number 10. Keep practicing. As the saying goes, practice makes perfect. Whenever you get frustrated and want to give up and never knit again, just take a break for a few hours. Do something else that helps clear your mind of any anger and frustration. Knitting is not always easy, and you will mess up from time to time, especially in the beginning. But once you get the hang of it, you take off running, and there are endless possibilities with what you can make. There are many different stitch designs, knitting projects, yarn colors and textures. So practicing one knitting style repeatedly until you can do it without a guide will help you master knitting and be able to move on to other knitting styles. Number 9. Join a knitting class or group for support or design ideas. Joining a knitting class or group may sound embarrassing or like something old people do. But joining a knitting class or group can really help you improve your knitting skills. Having others around you who are more experienced in knitting is a big comfort for some people. When we are struggling to do a certain knitting stitch or pattern, we don't always feel comfortable or understand how to fix where we went wrong after looking it up online. It's better to have someone in front of you explain and show you how to fix what you're struggling with. Being in a knitting group may even give you more ideas on what you want to try next. Whether it be a new pattern, color scheme, or yarn that is of a higher thread count or make, such as cotton or wool. Knitting groups are there to support their members and help them enjoy the work they're doing. Number 8. Learning to cast off your finished project. Casting or binding off your finished project means you're finished and satisfied with how the project came out. Never cast or bind off if you're not done, unless you plan on changing the color or sewing them together. Some beginners start with blanket squares, which are simple square patches of any size, but are usually easier to work with when at least 10 by 10 squares or more. After they have completed enough blanket squares to combine for what they wanted their project to be, they sew them together with a sewing needle or a knitting sewing needle and thread. Casting or binding off a project also means you are now able to begin a new project or continue with the project you just finished. Like making clothes, you have to knit 2 pieces and sew them together. Number 7. Learn the common abbreviations used in knitting guides. Most guides use abbreviations when explaining a pattern or design. Learning these common abbreviations will save you a lot of confusion and time from having to look them up online. A few of the more common abbreviations are about, casting on, stitch style, and casting off. Number 6. Try to keep count of your stitches. Keeping track of your stitches will help you from the beginning of your project to the end of your project. Sometimes you may gain or lose a stitch or two. That's fine. Don't panic. You can always start again and go slower. Usually, the times we lose or gain a stitch is when we're so entranced by our work that we begin to daydream or go fast while making the next stitches. This happens to even the most experienced knitters. Number 5. Master the knit stitch before moving on to the purl stitch. The knit stitch is the easiest to master once you get the hang of it. There is another common knitting stitch to use that may take a bit more concentration to learn and master. Mastering the knit stitch will help you in mastering the knitting stitches called the purl stitch, which is essentially a backwards knit stitch. Number 4. First start with a small batch of yarn. Maybe start with a simple 10 by 10 square. Make 10 knit stitches casting on, then continue with the 10 knit stitches into the next row. This is to make sure if you happen to make any mistakes, you can start over more easily. Making mistakes will happen with your first knitting project, no matter what you're making. Just keep up the good work, and you'll end up with a project to be proud of. Number 3. Learn the knit stitch to cast on with. Learning to cast on is the first thing you need to learn when beginning to knit. The cast-on style, the knit stitch, is one of the first stitches you learn to cast on with. Learning how to knit stitch cast on comes easy to some and difficult to others. Just keep casting on with the knit stitch as many times as it takes to get comfortable using the stitch. Number 2, choose the yarn you buy carefully. There are many different types of yarn, including colors and textures. Even though you may fall in love with the prettiest, softest yarn, you may want to hold off on starting with the nicest yarn. All first-time knitters should start on cheap and basic yarn. Your first knitted project is not going to come out perfect. This tip is saving you time and yarn that you can use to make something beautiful when you get better. Number 1, know your knitting needle sizes. It is very important to know the sizes of your knitting needle because this lets you know how big of a gap there will be between rows. Most knitting needle sizes are in the metric system of sizes. So if you need a size US 8, the needle size to look for in the metric system is 5 millimeters. Knowing your needle sizes will help to make certain projects. One design for a project may want 2 or 3 different sizes. Though it's rare, some patterns require more than one needle size. If you liked our video, be sure to click like and subscribe for more HowExpert Top 10 videos on all topics from A to Z in the future. Also, let us know what other topics you want us to do a HowExpert Top 10 video in the future in the comments below. Thank you. Have an amazing day and take care. HowExpert publishes quick how-to guides on all topics from A to Z by everyday experts. Visit HowExpert.com to learn more.